The Cincinnati Bengals used day 2 of the NFL draft to address a couple of pressing needs, but did they reach? Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jake Liscow. He's James Rapien. We are your hosts covering the Bengals here on Locked On Bengals since 2016 as a daily podcast that the everydayers know about. And welcome back to those of you that are everydayers. If you'd like to become an everydayer, maybe you'd like to become one of those that makes Locked On Bengals their first listen, just hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts and find Locked On Bengals on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and you won't have to miss an episode because you'll be subscribed. The Bengals made 2 selections on day 2 of the NFL draft, as of course scheduled in the second and third rounds. They add a linebacker, they add an interior offensive lineman, and neither were players, James, that we really mentioned a whole lot throughout this process, and certainly not in the rounds they were drafted. Talk about the players first, Demetrius Knight and Dylan Fairchild. I can understand where the Bengals are coming from here. Let's start with Demetrius Knight, James. As you're in the building, you heard what all the coaches had to say and everything. What were your thoughts with the Bengals here as things were approaching in the second round and the Bengals were on the clock?
Well, it's obvious. Tate, Ratledge, maybe Kevin Winston Jr. You could go a bunch of different ways. If Mike Green's on your board, you could go that route. Obviously, I don't think that was something they considered given the off the field, but like a bunch of different ways you could go. If you wanted to address edge and not go that, Nick Scorton was still a bit, like you could go a bunch of different ways. And maybe, I don't know why they felt really compelled to go with Demetrius Knight, and shocked. Honestly, I'm shocked. I'm still surprised. When in spoilers, sometimes you find out things ahead of time, and I found this out ahead of time, and I was just instantly hoping it wasn't true because it doesn't make sense. And this doesn't have anything to do with Demetrius Knight. And if anyone in the Knight family ends up watching this or hearing this, and I get it because it's YouTube or it's podcast and word travels and stuff, it has nothing to do with Demetrius Knight, the prospect. But what it has to do with is this Bengals franchise, the past 5 years, guard has literally derailed or gotten in the way of everything they've tried to do, from winning Super Bowls to keeping the rookie quarterback healthy to getting back to the Super Bowl to keeping Joe Burrow upright the past 2 years. Obviously, he stayed healthy last year. Like, guard has been an issue throughout that process, each and every one of those years. It's never not been a talking point. And so I get why they didn't take a guard at 17, but they clearly, it was their biggest need going into the draft. And when Tate Ratledge is there, this is the dream. This is the dream that all of these mock simulators have had. And so many people have mocked Tate Ratledge to the Bengals at 49. It would have been such a popular pick, a popular selection. It would have made so much sense, and it did make sense. And by the way, the Bengals like Tate Ratledge. It's not like there was a medical flag like there was with Jahad Campbell. It's not like that there was some kind of character concern or anything like that. Like, they were willing to draft him. But somehow, some way, Demetrius Knight held the tiebreaker. The 25-year-old linebacker that has started for 1 season. And that cannot, should not, would never be the process, I think, for most teams, especially with a team that has Joe Burrow and needs to keep him upright. Like, that's the season. The season is keeping Joe upright. And so, yeah, this doesn't really so far have anything to do with Demetrius Knight, the prospect himself, but the process, there's an issue there. And the issue is, if linebacker is such a huge need that they had to freaking address, well, then you should have done it last month. If it was such a concern and a stress, we all knew this linebacker class wasn't good. And if they were that concerned about it, well, Jahad Campbell was available on Thursday. Like that. So that's where I'm at, is I was just really surprised that they forced it at linebacker when the dream scenario showed up at guard. And this wasn't one of those situations where it's like, oh, well, this is the dream scenario at guard, but the Bengals don't feel that way. Like, they really like Tate Ratledge. And so I'm shocked that they didn't take him.
I don't understand how the calculus, when you're considering linebacker versus guard, if they're similarly graded and they're really close, lands on linebacker for all those reasons you say. I don't understand how you look at your team and you're like, well, we can get this guard that we really like, or we can get this linebacker that we really like. Has to be at the same pick, which is another issue that I have. But then you land on the linebacker.
Not with Joe Burrow.
I just don't understand how you get to that point. That's point number one. Point number two, we'll go through a few points. Point number two, and then we'll talk about Demetrius Knight, the player, because I actually like the player.
Sure.
I like Demetrius Knight, the player.
That's why I was trying to separate it, because I don't want it to be like, it's two different things.
I would have liked Demetrius Knight, the player, much more in the third round. And so that's one of the things we'll get to when we get through the point. So point one is guard versus linebacker. And maybe they weren't close, but
how is that possible?
Yeah, I don't know how you get there. So I think they're close on the Bengals board. How do you go then linebacker instead of Tate Ratledge? So that's point number one. Point number two is 48 was traded. The Bengals picked at 49. 51 was traded.
Yep.
The Bengals said after they picked Demetrius Knight that they were sitting there watching the picks like they were with Logan Wilson, hoping he wouldn't be picked. Fine. They believe strongly that Demetrius Knight was going to be picked in this part of the draft. I don't think that was going to be the case. They could have traded back. Maybe they didn't want to go back as far as they would have had to go back. Maybe they were worried about that. But much like the guard versus linebacker conversation here, the cost of missing on Demetrius Knight is you go down a tier in a linebacker class that has two linebackers in it that anybody likes at a really high level. And I like Demetrius Knight, but a tier. This feels like the McKinley Jackson thing to me, right? Where they knew they needed a player in a class where that position wasn't strong, and so they did it earlier than they had to, instead of picking from a pool of guys that were all pretty much the same. And that's where Demetrius Knight fit for us. And much like McKinley Jackson last year, McKinley Jackson was seen by the Bengals as better than the other nose tackle prospects. Demetrius Knight seen as better by a tier than the other linebacker prospects. But the opportunity cost then is you're okay then with missing out on that tier of guard. Mm-hmm. So they're not okay with missing out on that tier of linebacker, but they're okay with missing out on that tier of guard. And that's another thing with this that I just don't really, I can't reconcile that, James.
No. Like, if you were painting the ideal Bengals draft without trading back, it probably involved a guard on day 2, probably at pick 49. Maybe that's Tyler Booker falling if you really wanted that. Maybe it's Tate Ratledge at 49. A lot of times it was Tate Ratledge at 49. And he was there. And instead, and now this is when it almost gets to the prospect, but I don't want to dive into that because we're going to hear from LinkedIn in just a second, or hear about LinkedIn in just a second. But it should be all about how can you keep Joe upright. And if it wasn't that in free agency, then the draft should have been about that. And you should have wanted to get one of the higher end guys. And this doesn't mean that Dylan Fairchild isn't going to be able to protect Joe Burrow. I mentioned him. I think we did mention him as a third round type guy, like the Georgia guys, not just Tate. But it's passing on Tate is wild to me. So let's get into it. Let's get into the Demetrius Knight, the player, because I think that is tied in, and it's a linebacker and everything he offers as a player. And there's a lot of good things. It's still, even after I heard Al Golden talk for 17 minutes and Zach Taylor talk for, I still left thinking Tate Ratledge was right there. And so let's dive into the player a little bit. We'll do that coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs, well, it's here for you. It's going to make your life easy because as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business, it's always on your mind. And man, this draft is going to be on my mind for quite some time. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in, by the way, because you need a partner that's going to work just as hard as you do. And when you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. You can post your job and use LinkedIn's new feature that will help you write job descriptions. And if you use the hashtag hiring frame, you'll double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Demetrius Knight, the player, was during one of our mock draft Mondays that everydayers will remember, a candidate for a second round pick because PFF had him as the top linebacker on the board. And based on his tape in 2024, there are those out there, including I think Lance Zierlein, who thought this is the best tape I've seen at linebacker this year.
Mm-hmm.
He was a late bloomer. He was playing quarterback early in his career at Georgia Tech, and he was a backup early in his career at Georgia Tech, and ends up a starter in 23 and in 24 at Charlotte and at South Carolina. Transfers a couple times, 6-year player, 25 years old coming out. I do think that he's perhaps, I think for linebacker, I'm not dinging guys as hard for their age necessarily. I hope that makes him a pro-ready linebacker. He will be in line to start on day one. That's part of this pick. They, I think, were feeling pressed to replace Jermaine Pratt. They had other opportunities to do so, as you pointed out, but they wanted to come out of this weekend with a second starting linebacker, and he will be that unless something goes really wrong for him in training camp. As an older player, he needs to be ready right away. Similar things we said about Logan Wilson. But he is a good athlete. He is a smart player. He will go crazy going downhill. He will bring that physical edge to the defense. These are all things that I love about the player. He's a good blitzer. He was described as a weight room addict, according to Dane Brugler's The Beast. He was a clear leader with South Carolina in the 1 year he was there, a team captain, again, in the 1 year he was there. I think there's a lot to like about the player, and I think the instant impact will be there. He will be starting, like I said, I think almost certainly, very likely, immediately, or he'll certainly have that opportunity, right?
He better be starting, just to be clear. He better be starting.
And it's just, the player is fine. It's just everything else, right? And I think if you get Demetrius Knight in the third and Tate Ratledge in the second, I'm probably pretty happy about it. I'm not talking about it being a round and a half or two early for Demetrius Knight compared to consensus. Wasn't in Dane Brugler's top 100, for example.
He was 120 on Brugler, 109 on Daniel Jeremiah. Just to give you an idea of where it's at. This isn't just us, because I think some are going to be like, you guys are just negative. Like, no one had him at 49. No one.
Well, and again, it's not about the player. I like the player. I think he'll be good. I think he can make a difference for you. We'll see if he can be special, like the game-changing kind of linebacker. I wouldn't project him to be like Fred Warner in the NFL, but you never know. These things can happen. It's just a process here is what we're stuck on. Like the wrapping your head around guard versus linebacker bit. And Tate Ratledge is older too, but
he's a 4-year starter.
Regardless, like it's guard versus linebacker in a clear starting need at both positions, and the clear tiebreaker to us going to the guy that can help protect Joe Burrow and bolster the strength of the team. So while I like Demetrius Knight, it's just a process thing and a consensus thing. And sometimes that doesn't matter. Sometimes the consensus is wrong. You see this all the time. Judging it tonight is based on the information that we have tonight. And that's what instant draft reactions are about. And obviously from here on, we'll see what happens with him when he gets into practices, when he gets into camp and all those things. And we don't know how that's going to go. But the analysis tonight is based on what we know or thought we knew tonight.
Sure. And by the way, welcome to the, not just the draft world, but the sports world. And hopefully Demetrius Knight is awesome. But that's not really the point. The point is the Bengals felt like they couldn't leave the second round without a linebacker if he was there. Like that's what they felt like they had to do going into today.
And there were 2 linebackers drafted today total.
3.
Sorry, 3.
3.
Schlesinger.
Yeah, Schlesinger, yes. But they woke up this morning and that was their top linebacker, and they felt like if they were going to address linebacker, it would likely have to be him, and certainly in round 2. And like, if you felt that desperate about the position, figure it out in free agency. If you're that worried about it, open up those purse strings a little bit and get it done before at one of these positions. Because when we get into the day 3 stuff, we're going to be talking about safety because they haven't addressed it yet. We're going to be talking about, can they still double dip at guard? And by the way, we can get into, and we'll have more time to discuss him, but let's get into Dylan Fairchild a little bit, because there's a lot to like about all of these guys. I think from a character standpoint, all of these guys check it. I just talking to him, like Demetrius Knight is literally a grown man, has a wife, has 2 children. He's going to be responsible. He's going to be a leader, was a captain in his first year at South Carolina. Like, all that stuff's going to happen. I met Shamar Stewart today, and he's awesome. Like, I think he's going to be an awesome personality, really fun in going to work really hard. And it's like, oh, well, that guy's going to work really hard and get the most out of his talent. We'll see how it works out. And I think Dylan Fairchild's the same way. He's like, it's going to be an honor to block for Joe Burrow. Talking about how excited he is to go pass set after pass set after pass set. He's comfortable doing that. And you know how many offensive linemen hate dropping back? And he's like, oh yeah, I got to work on my run blocking. And I like the run block, but I'm more comfortable pass blocking. It's like, that sounds great. That's awesome. But I do wonder if the Bengals felt like they needed to address guard at 81 because they didn't at 49. And this is part of the mock that was at least my mock. I forget what we did here, but I was like, oh, well, they'll wait until round 3 to get a guard. It feels like it's the Bengal way. And I don't know why. It's always like guard is always on the back burner. And they put it on the back burner again today, and they get Dylan Fairchild. Honestly, I would feel so great if they were like, screw this. Let's get Tate, Ratledge, and Dylan Fairchild, and we have the Georgia boys with Amarius Mims, and we're set. We have all these guys. You know, I would have been down with that. But you wouldn't have needed to get Dylan Fairchild in round 3, and I felt like they needed to. And not that it's a huge reach, but I do think that's probably about as early as he would go.
It's the top end of his range, and it was the top end of Demetrius Knight's range too. Literally, I think both guys drafted pretty close to their ceiling.
Yeah.
By consensus, it's a reach. By consensus, both guys are reaches. There's a lot to like about Dylan Fairchild, though. And so, again, not really about the player. It's more about a reaction to the consensus. And the consensus is not always right, but the convention of the consensus, or the conventional wisdom, or the collective wisdom, that's what I was trying to say. The collective wisdom of the consensus is often telling over time. That's why people are so excited to see Philadelphia drafting Jahad Campbell at 31, or Baltimore drafting Malachi Starks at 27, or Baltimore drafting Mike Green at 59 in the second round, or the Eagles taking Andrew Makuba, or the Falcons getting Xavier Watts at 96. The consensus is why people react the way they react, because many, many people saw these prospects as better than where they got drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the consensus is onto something. But the player in Dylan Fairchild is a player that I can understand the vision for. I can understand the vision for Demetrius Knight as well. It's just a process that feels reachy. And especially when you consider if they had taken Tate Ratledge in the second round, maybe they don't get Demetrius Knight in the third round, but maybe they are able to then pick Kevin Winston or Xavier Watts if they liked either of those safeties. And we think they did. So let's talk a little bit about Dylan Fairchild. We'll talk again, James, about the process a little bit here that led to Dylan Fairchild being the pick. Talk about what they can do on day 3, as I think many Bengals fans are like, what can they do to salvage this thing? Because I think a lot of people are feeling like this is not going super well. And I would be somewhat inclined to agree. Although, like I said, you can see the upside for all these guys. And we'll probably talk about that when we wrap up the entire draft tomorrow. But let's talk about Dylan Fairchild here a little bit specifically. Talk about day 3 a little bit coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and the NBA playoffs are here. It's the NBA playoffs, the NFL draft. Shedeur Sanders still there, by the way. You want to check out those odds? By the way, that's wild, Jake.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Agree with that? I mean, it's crazy. Like, I get waiting a little bit, but that's kind of crazy. So if you want to get on those odds, which I don't think anyone could have predicted that he would still be there, going to get a steal. At some point, I wonder if there's Shedeur Sanders range for the bank. No, I'm just kidding. Even though, nice backup, round 6. All right, but the point is you can get on all the action with FanDuel. And right now, you place that first $5 bet, and you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Don't miss out. Go to FanDuel.com right now. Use that website, that America's #1 sports book, and place that first $5 bet and get $250 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com to claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
Dylan Fairchild has awesome pass blocking data.
Yep.
Awesome pass blocking production at Georgia, where he started in 2024, started for part of 2023, and in both years was a great pass blocker. He is a guy that comes with a wrestling background, high-level wrestling background. He's a guy that translates that attitude to the field and was on the freaks list for his work in the weight room, where he has a 440-pound bench, a 570-pound squat, and a 370-pound power clean, according to the Beast. He can move guys. The guy's powerful. He can anchor. You better believe he can anchor. He's got the length that Scott Peters is looking for with 33.5-inch arms at his pro day, 325 pounds at 6'5". Not the most experienced player. Sounds like Amarius Mims a little bit in that respect. Powerful, and drawing comparisons to Wyatt Teller from both Joe Goodberry and Dane Brugler's The Beast. Yep. Independent comparisons for both of those guys. Was seen to be a third to fourth round player. The Bengals pick him in the middle of the third, of course. And I understand the vision here. And he understands Scott Peters' system. He's well-versed in Scott Peters' strike system. So good fit there, right? But the process here gets me again, James. When looking at Kevin Winston going with the very next pick, for example, Xavier Watts going at 96. And the Bengals decided that they wanted to prioritize the linebacker and then the guard here, which I totally get at this point, but is inconsistent with what they did in the second round over the safety that they might have liked for.
Yeah, I think, Dylan Fairchild wasn't being considered at 49, but Kevin Winston was.
And what does that tell you?
Right? And so that's what's rough is, and Tate Ratledge was, obviously. And so if you take Tate Ratledge, then you don't have to take Dylan Fairchild, and then you could take Kevin Winston because you really like Kevin Winston and he fell to round 3.
And then you got 2 second-round players. Crazy.
No doubt. If that's why coming into today, I was thinking at 49, like, man, Nick Eamon-Wari, like, I'm thinking like, oh, can you get a little like maybe Will Johnson? Like I was opening my mind to that at 49 because it's 49. Will Johnson's could be a top 15 player in this draft. And so that's it, is it kind of forces your hand. They put themselves in this corner. And I think what they would say, this is what they would say, is, well, we looked at the guards, and there were more guards there than there were linebackers, and we felt comfortable with more of these guards, and we could get one later. That's what they would say. And what I would say is, I want the best guard. Why would you not want the best guard? Linebacker. Linebacker is this position of that. Like, I never want to hear about positional value again when it comes to that, because if protecting Joe matters, and everyone agrees that it does, why wouldn't you have taken Tate? And it would have taken the pressure off. And I can argue that adding a high-end safety would be just as valuable as your second linebacker, and they could have gotten that high-end safety. And now, as we go to day 3, part of the process, it's like, all right, well, you still got to check safety off. Are you going to double dip at guard? I would want to. It makes everything tougher. And I was looking at just NFL.com, their list of best remaining guys. There's a decent amount of linebackers.
Yeah,
because
linebackers and running backs.
day 3 was the linebacker day.
Mm.
Like you could get Barrett Carter around 4 and they feel pretty good, or you get like I'll name a bunch of them. Like there's so many of them. I was going through and it's like, oh, like you could get Danny Stutzman out of Oklahoma if you like him. You could get Cody Simon out of Ohio State. You could get Jeffrey Bassa, Smail Mondin Jr. out of Georgia. And there are others. I just saw a couple there, and I'm not looking at the sheet. I'm literally just naming linebackers to show this was the sweet spot. Like we talk about sweet spot of where to, and that's what's tough. Because what they're saying is Demetrius Knight was so much better than everybody else that we could not take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone would agree that Tate Ratledge was so much better than everybody else that you should not take it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's what I was saying at the beginning. Like, I just don't understand how the concern about the linebacker cliff was more significant than the concern about the guard cliff. And obviously they felt comfortable, like you said, they felt comfortable with their guard options in the 3rd round. And they felt more comfortable than we did. But looking ahead to day 3, Dylan Fairchild, by the way, just to wrap this up before we talk about day 3, I would expect Dylan Fairchild to have a great shot at starting at left guard to start the year. Is that an ideal situation to ask of Dylan Fairchild for his first year in the NFL? We'll find out. He's 22 years old, so it's not like he's too young or anything for it. And maybe he hits the ground running. That is certainly the hope. Put that great pass protection track record in college to use. Figure out run blocking later, much like Amarius Mims, right? Where you have a somewhat inexperienced player, a good physical tool set, but he didn't test. Didn't test much. He did a jump, I think. I think there was an injury. He had a pec injury, I believe. And a great wrestling background. All these things. A lot of things to like here, right? And he's probably starting right away. Hopefully he's great. Hopefully Demetrius Knight is a captain on this team for the next 4 years, right? And the leader they need on defense, because they need a leader on defense.
Sure.
Maybe that's part of what it is with Demetrius Knight. I'm sure it is, actually. He I'm sure had a A++ grade for character.
I think all three of these. I think all 3 of these guys do. I really do.
Yeah. But if you talk about needing a leader on that defense, I think they see Demetrius Knight as a guy who went into South Carolina, immediately became that guy for South Carolina, and could pretty quickly develop into that in Cincinnati on a defense that needs personality.
He's older than Jamar Chase, just to give you guys an idea.
He's about 3.5 years younger than Jermaine Pratt.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's not like he would be the young guy next to Logan Wilson. Like they're in like the same generation. Logan's older. I'm not, but you know what I'm saying? Like and so the point is he realistically, this isn't me actually knocking the age right now. He realistically could lead. Not many 21-year-olds are coming in and leading. And it's just tough to do. It's just life experience wise and stuff, but he's a grown man with responsibilities. And so, yeah, could certainly do that. That's the other thing is I think now there's going to be some that say, well, James and Jake, you literally just said that all 3 of these guys that they just drafted, Shamar Stewart, Demetrius Knight, and Dylan Fairchild, all have a chance to start.
Yep.
And they do. But that doesn't mean that it's not, we don't have gripes with the draft, because they could have still gotten 3 starters that were higher end prospects. But what they would say is, yeah, these are our guys. And so time will tell, as it is with the draft always. But we do have some reservations. Who knows? Maybe they write their ways a little bit, get a little more value on day 3, where they have 3 picks. They did not trade back. 4th rounder, 119 overall. 5th rounder, 153 overall. 6th rounder, I believe it's 193 overall. We'll see. Maybe they do make a move. I don't want to make a move now. I'm not trading back in the 4th round to get an extra 6th rounder. I would want to try to get the quality here. And the time to trade back was 49. They didn't do it. So to me, I'm probably sticking and picking on Saturday.
Yeah, the thing about, just to go back to your point about talking about starters and talking about process, it's never black and white. I think that there's way too much black and white analysis in sports. Hopefully, if you're still here at the end of this podcast, it's because you believe in shades of gray. You want to hear all sides of this thing. You've probably heard us talk about it all night. The Locked On Bengals insiders saw me texting you guys all night with my thoughts on it. But looking ahead to day 3, we're thinking maybe another interior offensive lineman, maybe a safety, defensive tackle still on the menu, tight end still on the menu, Gunnar Helm standing out in that respect, and Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame at tight end. If they wanted to go back to interior offensive line, Jalen Rivers is a guy that they had a meeting with, and he is still out there. And Miles Frazier wasn't picked. They want to go running back. A lot of running backs in the 4th round that could be interesting, with really not a whole lot of running backs picked yet. DJ Giddens standing out. Cam Scatabo, you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Dylan Sampson, another running back that if they
Jaden Blue, my guy.
Those guys out there. Defensive tackle.
Bayshall Tootin.
Yep. Defensive tackle, pretty well picked over. CJ West stands out as a guy that I would really like. And at some point, maybe Deion Walker. Ty Robinson also still unselected, actually. Ty Robinson at some point can make a lot of sense.
I think all 3 of them, like if you get one of those guys, that's a nice addition to your defensive front. Would you take Jack Sawyer?
The difficult thing about drafting Jack Sawyer is that your edge room is very crowded at that point.
I know. It's wild that he's there, and he's probably going to be gone before the Bengals pick at 119. But
yeah,
interesting to see him still there.
Could see the Jalen Reed pick though. Did we land there in our predictive mock, or did we change that one? I think we might have changed that one.
We might have changed that one, but that is. After watching all the Kevin Winston Jr., liking Kevin Winston Jr., they go with the other guy.
Maybe it's Hunter Voller, and much like Matt Lee, Hunter Voller in the 6th round, a guy the sheet absolutely loves, has a clear 1st-round grade on Hunter Voller out of Wisconsin, safety. Maybe that's the safety pick. Anyway,
maybe it is.
Maybe other?
They may take another linebacker.
Yeah, are there any other day 3 guys you wanna mention here?
Do you know how to say the kid from Stanford's name?
Alec
Aome. Yeah.
Yeah, I do not know, but if they wanted to go receiver, I would be on board for that particular player.
That I like him. That's all. I don't think they are, just to be clear.
Yeah.
But I'm going to figure out how to say his name. Alec Iomanor. Oh, Alec Iomanor. That was easy. Out of Stanford. Like him a lot. If he's there, I'd be in, but I don't think that they're necessarily in. You mentioned DJ Giddens. Oddly enough, I think they could look at linebacker. It wouldn't shock me if they're in on Barrett Carter, if they're in on one of these guys. Your boy Ty Hamilton.
Yeah, I mentioned. Oh no, you said Ty Hamilton. I mentioned Ty Robinson.
Yeah,
Nebraska.
Yeah,
also.
But Ty Hamilton. I say your boy because you mentioned he visited a couple times Ohio State. Jalen Rivers. If they think he can.
I mentioned him as well. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Did you mention David Walker? I don't think they take another edge, but I like him.
Yep.
Another one.
Marcus Bowe out there if they wanted to go back to interior offensive line.
Marcus Bowe, Trevor Etienne.
You said Jackson Slater. Miles Frazier I also mentioned, but I expect Miles Frazier will probably be picked pretty early here on day 3 unless there's
Luke Kandra.
Medical issue.
Bearcat to Bengal. Come on, Luke.
There you go.
I want a little double dip at guard. A little double dip.
We'll see what they do. We'll have you covered for those 3 picks that we're expecting the Bengals to make on Saturday of this NFL draft. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.